Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier. Joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. Today we're here to do a mailbag show as we enter week 14 of this disastrous 2024 season for the New York Giants. Dragged on week 14. There's somehow another 4 weeks to go. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 14, 15, 16, 17. Wow, 5 more games to go. Unbelievable. Yeah, man. But we're going to talk about other stuff, I assume, on this podcast. I don't think anybody wants a preview of the upcoming game with the New Orleans Saints. But without further ado, before we get into that, actually, Nick, how was your holiday weekend?
It was excellent. Got to, do the whole turkey thing. You know what, man? I like Thanksgiving. I appreciate the quality time. It is kind of odd, though, that we shove stuffing and onions up a turkey carcass's ass and celebrate it and eat it. I don't know.
Well, if you're John Madden, you stuff a duck.
Yeah, you stuff a duck up a turkey's ass, and then it's like the primary thing we talk about too when we're sitting down eating the turkey that has an onion up its ass. Right. Like I hear turducken so much on Thanksgiving to the point where I'm like, all right, I get it. Like shut. Like I don't know, maybe I'm just a curmudgeon about it, but do you feel that at all?
To an extent, for sure. Like the turkey is not that good. Like we've upgraded our recipe, my mom and my aunt, so it's gotten better to an extent. And it is a lot better than what it used to be with an upgraded recipe. Shout out Sarah Tarbell for her recipe that I've been using. And I told my mom about it. But it's still not great. Like I'd rather have like steak or like a roast or like some kind of beef. And my dad does make flank steak, which is amazing, or skirt steak, which is amazing on Thanksgiving. But like turkey in general is just like not a great meat, in my opinion.
It's not. If it's cooked well, though, like my mother does a great job cooking that thing. She flips it upside down and she swears by it. And she told me about it like 900 times. Like, oh, yeah, that's cool, Mom. But it is moist and it's pretty solid. But it's all about the accompaniments. And I got to ask you before we get into this, I'm not sure if we have a mailbag question about it, but it is the season. What is your favorite Thanksgiving accompaniment?
Oh, I am actually a huge stuffing guy. That's my favorite of the sides. Though I will say this.
You put sausage in it there, kid?
They don't put sausage in theirs. It's my Aunt Carol's who makes that. Shout out Aunt Carol. It's excellent. She does an excellent job. I always take a bunch home. But actually, you know what? A close competitor for me is the sweet potato with the marshmallows toasted on top.
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, great, hell yeah, dude.
Great dish right there.
That, mashed potatoes, some gravy, all of it, dude. Now, Thanksgiving's an elite holiday, but it was good. How was yours, brother? Good?
It was great. I spent, with my family. They're all diehard Giants fans. Saw my cousin, his kids. We watched that pathetic game. And, my cousin, Ryan, she is gunning to get an appearance on the podcast, Nick. So at some point, we might give Ryan an appearance. I will say this, for an 11-year-old girl, she's got quite the mouth on her. So we may have to make that episode we have to put the curse label on that episode because she could let him rip. Okay. So Ryan may get on the show if things get bad enough for this franchise. That's where we're headed potentially. But I will say this. I did get a chance to play the last round of the season. And I do need to bring this up because last round of the season, 48 degrees out but sunny. Hendricks Golf Course. I shot my personal record, Nick. I did it. I locked in. It was the only time I've ever played the sport where all 4 were, 3.5 were working. The chipping was amazing. The drives were amazing. The irons were amazing. The putting was, I guess, my brother, Matty, who was there, who I beat that day, by the way, only the second time I've ever beaten him, said it was an all 4 kind of day. He thinks my putting was average to above average. I would consider my putting pretty bad or average at best that day. I did miss 3 different putts from 3 to 4 feet. That would have made the score better, but new personal record, Nick, 84 at Hendricks. So I was very excited about that, hitting that 84 number. Previous best, 89. Yep.
Oh, well, you beat it by that much. Holy shit.
Big day for me. And it's a great way to close the season out because now it's too cold.
Yeah. No,
so this was 4 minutes of talk that probably people aren't going to care about. So maybe I'll put in the show notes or something. Fast forward to 4:30 for Giants football talk.
I think it's fine. I think we could just roll right into the questions. We'll make this a natural transition, Dan.
All right, let's roll in with XXXXXXX question. Hey, Dan, mailbag question, but too long for a tweet, and I'm not paying for premium to type a longer tweet. I respect that. Anyways, why is everyone so hell-bent on wanting to fire Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? Sure, Shane's drafts haven't yielded great returns. KT and Neal were both consensus number 1 prospects at their position. It's not Joe Shane's fault that Neal has been as terrible as he has, and KT has been average, above average at times. 2023 looks pretty bleak, though, to be honest, and 2024 looks promising. His free agent and trades are probably middle of the pack. Daboll's record as head coach is unsatisfactory. However, we are only 2 years removed from Daboll being named the best coach in football. Last season was chock full of injuries. This season is kind of a wash and full of injuries also, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to Daboll being a bad coach. We know Daboll and Joe Schoen wanted a quarterback. We know they were locked in on May and Daniels. Do people really think this season should have been as bad or would have been as bad had they gotten Jaden Daniels or Drake May?
Look, I think a lot of Giant fans hold this position as well. They want to be patient on Joe Schoen, but I completely understand why people are also done on it, because the last 2 years at the conclusion of this season have been catastrophically bad for the New York Giants. Now, I'll say this. It seems like the Giants, I mean, we had Mason on the podcast and he substantiated this. The Giants are in a healthy cap moving forward, which is a credit to Joe Schoen. But when you look at the draft picks, have not been a hit. When you look at the investment in Daniel Jones, when there was years of evidence to suggest Daniel Jones is not a quarterback that you pay $40 million to, that set this franchise back 2 years. And I think a lot of Giant fans are rightfully saying, we cannot have a general manager set us back and then have him pick another quarterback when he has whiffed so many times in the draft. So let's just turn the page and get a new general manager. And I think there's a lot of Giant fans out there who have that opinion on the whole Joe Schoen thing, especially if you're going to tear the Band-Aid off of the Brian Daboll experience, which the Giants may be forced to do if he loses the locker room and is trending in that direction. I know that's conjecture. It's outside looking in. I could be off there, but there are at least reasons to believe that this locker room could be tuning Daboll out.
And so I think I'm with you on all that, Nick, and I think it makes a lot of sense. When it comes to Joe Schoen, we'll do it piecemeal. When it comes to Joe Schoen, I want to give them credit for their interest, like this listener says, in the draft and the quarterbacks, Drake May and Jaden Daniels. Jaden, who we kind of only found out because of Hard Knocks. Drake, because we found out because Joe Schoen was at like 5 of his games. I also now feel comfortable saying this. I told you this a while ago, Nick, but he's no longer on the team. A former player on the Giants that was on the team last season, all the way through this season. I won't reveal his name for his sake. I can't reveal where I met him at because that could really get some people in trouble, and I'm not going to do that. But he told me that when he was going out for off-season workouts, and this was unprompted. We weren't talking quarterbacks. We weren't talking draft. I told Nick about this. He told me the Giants loved Drake May. He said every time he would go in for these off-season workouts, they'd be watching film of May and talking about how much they loved him. So I actually still feel they loved him more than Jaden Daniels, but the Giants probably opted not to include all of that love on Hard Knocks. So they were zoned in on these two quarterbacks, two of who I would love the Giants to have. But Nick, I can't excuse the idea of, well, let's not take free agency that seriously at quarterback because we're going to look to get one in the draft. When they knew that Washington was never trading the pick to the Giants, they were taking a quarterback there. And the Patriots are not going to probably have a bad eval on May and pass on quarterback because they also needed a quarterback. And May was a really fun prospect to take a chance on for them and sitting right in their lap. So he has to kind of think that through when he says, we'll do Drew Lock, Daniel Jones, and Tommy DeVito as our quarterback room, because it's just unacceptable to me to punt the season at that position. And if you were going to do that, well, then you don't do things like bring in those free agents on the offensive line and trade for Brian Burns. You just don't do that. I can be more convinced you can do the Burns thing because he's 25 and you could be looking as a long-term move. And there's Phoenix. He says, what's up? But I can't be convinced on those other short-term type moves, Nick. So that's my biggest flaw with him. On the Daboll side, I'm running out. I had a conversation with my dad. I watched football with my dad. Shout out Ron Schneier yesterday. Recording this on Monday. We watched Red Zone because the Giants weren't on, thank God. And he was, grilling me. What do you want to do about Schoen and Daboll? What do you want to do? What do you think is going to happen? What do you want to do? And I've just lost interest, I guess, in the upside, quote unquote, of Brian Daboll. Great point you brought up. He was just recently named head coach of the year just 2 years ago, and he did have a fantastic year. But when you really dig into the nitty gritty of that, which Nick and I have done a bunch on this podcast, a lot of that was, I don't want to say luck based, but variance was in play. Had a wildly easy schedule, won a ton of close score games, had a field goal missed by the Titans that could have changed the whole season, went 3-7-1 at one point, was dominated by the division rival the entire season, every game they played, not including Washington, who at the time was a joke, and then got dominated in the playoffs by a division rival. So it almost feels like maybe he wasn't the best coach that season, but was gifted it because the Giants' expectations were so low, and it was one of those types of situations. Meanwhile, we fast forward to this year, and I think the Giants' red zone offense is worse with Brian Daboll versus Mike Kafka. I think the Giants' offense in general is worse with Brian Daboll versus Mike Kafka, just considering all the factors at play. I mean, Mike Kafka never got to call plays for Malik Neighbors, right? And we just saw last week, I think it was, or 2 weeks ago, Neighbors had a 12% or 16% slot rate, which is just unacceptable at this point. You want to talk about how Neighbors hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3, and he's basically evolved into like a Wan'Dale Robinson plus, essentially. He has like 8 receptions for 64 or some bullshit. Well, move him into the slot more. Try to find some free releases for him. Figure out ways to get him the football earlier and in better spots, and he's not doing that. We don't see Neighbors in the slot. So I've lost a lot of faith in Daboll as this offensive genius or this offensive advantage, let's say, Nick. Don't know if he's a good leader of men. He was when they were winning, hasn't seemed to be when they're losing. I think he has all sorts of issues when it comes to game clock management and game situation management. They have penalties that they shouldn't have, lack of discipline. So I just don't know if he's actually that good of a coach, and I'm just no longer caring, basically, if they lose him, because I'm not positive or sold or anywhere near that.
And then there's also the conflict too that he had last year with his defensive coordinator. Now we can attribute that to Wink Martindale, and I'm sure it's shared, right? I'm sure Wink Martindale and Brian Daboll are at fault to some degree there, but that is a coordinator that you selected that just last season you went to the playoffs and won a playoff game with, and the relationship deteriorated so strongly. And according to reports, who knows if they're accurate, one of the reasons was Wink Martindale had no respect for Brian Daboll's ability to know or coach defense, which was like, oh, wow. I don't know if you want to look at that by saying that's on Brian Daboll for maybe trying to overstep his bounds. Is it on Wink Martindale for being arrogant? It's probably shared, right? But that's not a step in the right direction. That's not a check mark for Brian Daboll when the New York Giants are as bad as they've been over the last 2 years. So I understand why Giant fans have Daboll fatigue. I understand. I think this is a good question, and I think these are the types of conversations that people on Giants Twitter, they should be having at this point, right? To try to suss out exactly what's the best course of action for John Mara and ownership moving forward. I'm just not sold that the best course of action includes Brian Daboll right now, which is unfortunate. But why would I be convinced that it is? What has he shown us recently that convinces us that would be the case? I can't come up with a valid reason other than excuses. And I'm not saying people who lean on those excuses are wrong, but I'm just not there.
Yeah, and I think there's other factors in play too, right? Like you can look at his track record as a play caller, not so great outside of having Josh Allen. And you could look at some other things that I've read about that, we've, outside perspective, you and I, Nick, given him some credit for, or a lot of credit, I should probably say, for Josh Allen's development. But people closer to the situation have told me, look into this a little deeper and you'll see the credit belongs with Josh Allen's personal quarterback coach, who really is the reason why Josh Allen was able to improve his mechanics and become the player that he is today. I don't know who's right, our speculation or them. I'm sure it's probably a little bit of both, but I would lean more toward the quarterback coach who he's working with to improve things like mechanics. Like seeing the field was not an issue for Josh Allen at Wyoming. It was making the throws and mechanics, those of which have been fixed since he came to the NFL, or at least improved since he came to the NFL. So I don't know what he really offers to me. The idea is that he offers an offensive advantage every week and potential quarterback guru / guy who can develop young quarterbacks. And that idea is really strong, Nick. Like if he was definitely that, I'd be saying that's enough for me to keep him if we're going in the quarterback direction of drafting a quarterback. But I'm not so sold that that's even a reality. I think it's a speculation more than a reality. So it leaves me in a point where I'm not exactly entirely sold that he's offering much to the point where he deserves to keep his job.
No, yeah, it's a good conversation to have. We'll be evaluating over the next 5 weeks, but it does not look great at the moment for Brian Daboll. Matthew,
one more important thing on that, Nick, that I want to bring up to you before we move on. A few weeks ago, Malik Neighbors said, look what happens. We have the different quarterback and it's the same results.
Yeah.
That felt in a lot of ways like the locker room had the feeling, Nick, and I'm curious to get your take on this. And if you agree that I'm not even saying this is definitely my take, but I want to see if this is something that seems somewhat plausible to you. It felt to me like the locker room had the take of this regime is trying to basically pin this all on the quarterback when the reality is there's more issues than the quarterback.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. That's what
And when that message comes that with the locker room, dude, that's scary. That means that the locker room's kind of tuning out the message that the coaching staff is telling them and putting their own, putting their own stamp on the message.
That was the chewing gum interview too, where he threw Brian Daboll under the bus, and he was like, "Oh, talk to Dabes," and they're like, "Oh, are you saying there's an issue with play calling?" He's like, "No, but talk to him." It's like, yeah, of course, that's kind of what he's insinuating. It's don't insult people's intelligence and act as if that's not what he's insinuating. That's your rookie wide receiver, but there's obvious frustration. These are alpha males on a football team. They're all NFL professional athletes getting paid millions of dollars, and they're losing embarrassingly, and they're hearing about why they're losing. And then they see somebody that they respect, Daniel Jones, take the brunt of all of that when he is not the leader of the team. Now, he was a leader in the locker room. He's a leader as a player, but there are people above Daniel Jones who are at fault as well. And they're not getting, I guess in Malik Neighbor's mind, they should be getting blamed so much more than Daniel Jones. And I think the media has caught on to that at this point, because a lot of people are piling on Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
All right. We have Matthew LaMagna. I think I said that correctly. Matthew, thank you. Trying to think of something other than the GM head coach question. Did the Giants Jets miss time when they built their new stadium? Other teams have nicer facilities at costs that are comparable, while we're stuck with a sterile building that won't get another Super Bowl or a Final Four.
Oh yeah, Matthew. I'm gonna take a guess that it's LaMagna. That's my guess. Let's see who's right, Matthew.
I think you might be right there. I might capitulate right now and concede.
Okay. This is not a Devonta thing.
No, it's definitely Devonta Smith and Devonta.
No, it's not. But one time Devonta Freeman said, "My name is Devonta."
He does. Why would he know?
We don't. He would know his own name. Matthew, I'll say this. I don't think this is like a take or maybe even deems a question. I think it's a guarantee the Giants missed time building their new stadium. Not just mistimed it, they screwed up. Like if you look at the design, it's considered maybe by a lot of people, and I think it's correct, the worst modern design for an NFL stadium, considering how recently it was built. There's also issues of they didn't fix the bathroom problem at the stadium, still packed lines. Every time I go outside the bathroom, they haven't figured that out. And I see the Clippers are doing a great job.
So much shit on the field. You'd think that, people could just go wherever. Oh, that's so mean. I'm sorry.
I like that. So yeah, it's a horrific stadium. And my God, I've had so many people ask me, Nick, recently about selling their PSLs. It's a sad state of affairs. SSE Lover, whatever that is, sell the SSE Lover, says, if the Giants get the following in these hypotheticals, Dan and Nick, would you do it? I'll break these down one for one, and you could say yes, no, or maybe, and pontificate. Is that the word, Nick?
Yeah.
If you please. Okay. 3rd round pick in a trade straight up for Kayvon Thibodeau.
No, I would keep Kayvon.
I am keeping Kayvon. 3rd round pick straight up for Deonte Banks.
I'm keeping Deonte Banks.
This one I am keeping Deonte Banks, but I'm more open to a potential 3rd round pick for him. Wan'Dale Robinson for a 4th rounder.
I'm going to keep Wan'Dale.
I'll keep Wan'Dale. I would love to see a healthy pass game before I just make any declarations on any of these receivers. It's just such an unhealthy, off-time, off-rhythm pass game that they've put out there as a product for the last however many years. Okay, JMS for a 5th rounder.
I mean, I'm keeping JMS, obviously. I'm going to change this section. I'm not sure if this is how he wanted it, but let's make JMS Hyatt and Flott 4th rounders, because I'm not even going to entertain it as a 5th rounder. Probably not going to entertain it as a 4th rounder, if I'm going to be honest. Maybe Flott.
I would definitely take a 4th for Flott.
Flott had a good game last time. I think I would think about it as well, but I'm not sold on it, dude. Because who else, like right now, if someone would have traded it, maybe, it's only a round difference from what you had last year. It really depends on how they feel about him as a kid and development. He has shown signs this year, but I don't have any delusions of grandeur that he's going to come out and be this like really solid starting player. Because I didn't necessarily see that when they drafted him in the first place, but he was so young at the same time. And he was like 140 pounds.
Yeah, true. I mean, look, he was always going to be developmental prospect. I'm just willing to redo the rookie contract and take a 4th rounder on. Okay, this is the funny one. We'll end it here. Not funny, sad state of affairs that we're in. Would you take a 7th for Evan Neal? That's about all we could probably get.
I think it's a 5th rounder for Evan Neal is what he's asking, and then 7th for the rest. And would I take a 5th rounder for Evan Neal? I think I would, which sucks. Oh my God, that's crazy, right? Like that's one that I would entertain, man. I still want to give him a realistic shot, like an entire offseason so I'm going to say no, because I do want to give him that realistic shot at entire offseason at guard. And this guy's been injured basically every offseason that he has. So I'm willing to say no, we'll keep him instead of getting a 5th round pick. But I would entertain him, man, because he's not a tackle. He's just not an NFL tackle, and that sucks really bad.
If the Giants are willing to try and convert him to guard, like the Eagles have done with Mekhi Becton so brilliantly, I would not take a 5th rounder. If the Giants are set in their ways that he can't be a guard at the NFL level, we just feel that way, or at least not for us, I would probably take that pick because I'm with you, Nick. He's not going to be a tackle.
I'm curious as to why exactly, because I can understand maybe like they're running dart with him. Like it's not that he can't pull or get out into space. Like they're running dart, which means the backside offensive tackle is pulling to the front side and lead blocking or kicking out. So they don't mind running those types of plays where he has to kick out into space and use his athleticism that isn't nearly as impactful as we all hoped when the Giants selected him 7th overall out of Alabama. So I'm not 100% sure why they wouldn't give him a try, especially since he has good tape and his biggest vulnerabilities is the liability that is Evan Neal is because he is on an island and he has to commit himself and orient his hips in a certain way and protect his edges when he is by himself, which is vastly mitigated when you are inside and you have a tackle to one side and a center to the other. So why not give him a shot there? Maybe they were holding out hope, Dan, this season that he would figure it out at tackle. I think we just got to turn the page on that experiment, see if we could salvage anything, put him in inside a guard. And you know what? You have a position next year if you don't bring Greg Van Roten back where you can plug him in and you'll have him and Runyon as your guards with JMS, Andrew Thomas, and maybe Jermaine Illuminor. Well, he's under contract, so it would be Jermaine Illuminor.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I hope that the Giants can figure something out with this and salvage this pick. All right, the last part of Sel's question is, and I'm not going to read it the way he framed it because I disagree entirely with him on on what this is called. He called it a pork roll, egg and cheese sandwich. No, it is a Taylor ham, egg and cheese sandwich. Okay. Taylor ham, egg and cheese sandwich or bacon, egg and cheese sandwich, Nick, what's your go-to?
Taylor ham.
Same. I'm a Taylor ham guy. I'm also a no salt, pepper, ketchup guy. I don't need it. I think it has good enough flavor without putting that nasty ketchup condiment on.
Would you put a hash brown on it?
Oh yeah, it's much better with the hash brown.
Oh yeah, hash brown kills it.
So that'll add to the flavor. The ketchup is just sugary crap that I don't need on my sandwich. Like it's unnecessary. I'll eat it with some potatoes every now and then, but
you don't like that tomato juice?
It's not juice. It's not like tomato juice. It's like a corn syrup product, 70 grams of sugar. No, I know what you're getting at. But look, I have to hate on ketchup. I hate the condiment. All right. Ian Wennick says, when can we have a live meetup or tailgate? Good question. We've been trying, we want to do that. Nick and I want to do a big Blue Banter meetup with the fans. We almost had one this year. But unfortunately, and this is probably going to be the answer to this, we didn't because the season was over by the time we wanted to have it. And we need the Giants to be good or somewhat good for this to work. Nobody's going to want to come in a 2-6 season to a meetup. And it's not one that we want to be a part of. Like, we don't want to be in a lost season doing a meetup game. It's just not as fun. The energy isn't high. We need them to be good. So next time the Giants are good, Nick and I will likely be running one somewhere, and it will be fun to finally hang out and talk with everybody. All right, Mustafa Williams, Unchained 93. Have you taken a look at other GMs who have taken over bottom barrel franchises and turned them around? How long did they take on average? And are we being unfair to Joe Schoen given what he inherited? Horrible cap situation, bad roster. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's some merit to that argument. Now, I haven't done a deep dive. I mean, I could look over at, let's say, the Bears right now, Washington. I think all of these situations are different because the Giants were a true anomaly in the sheer fact that they denied the 5th-year option of Daniel Jones and then extended him after he won a playoff game for them. So there really aren't a lot of teams or a lot of situations in the history of the NFL that are the current 2024 New York Giants and the decisions that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll led this team down, where they steered this team. So I don't even know how much value I would get exactly out of that, but you could form a realistic argument to say that plan did not work. Does Joe Schoen deserve another shot at actually steering the ship towards the promised land that he actually envisions and not something that he inherited from Dave Gettleman. I'm not 100% sold on that, and it's not because of the failure of Daniel Jones, albeit that is a big reason, but also because he has whiffed on a lot of draft picks and a lot of decisions that he's made blew up in his face. And it does seem like, and this is a phrase I've used a ton, Dan, you take calculated risks in the NFL. Almost every single one of those calculated risks blew up in Joe Schoen's face over the last 2 years, it seems like. Now, he's had some hits this year, like the offensive line. That's good. I think Brian Burns is a very good football player. Absolutely. But still, we have 2 wins right now, and it's December. You know what I'm saying? So I can understand why there's so much frustration around Joe Schoen, and those whiffs could lead one to say, let's get rid of him. I just don't think ownership is probably going to part ways with Joe Schoen, but there's still some time left, I guess. This episode is brought to you by Skims. Get your hands on the best underwear in the land. Look, I'm sure, gentlemen, you're a lot like me. You don't want your fit to be too compact, nor do you want to be swinging around like you're trying to destroy a piñata. You want everything in place. Comfort on a cloud with no ride-up. That is the ideal situation, and Skims provides that situation for us, gentlemen. They sent me a few pairs. I wear them to work. I wear them while I'm working out, and they are exactly what I'm looking for in my underwear. And Christmas is right around the corner. So grab a pair of Skims for someone in your life. Maybe that someone is you, and you want that comfortable underwear for your whole situation down there. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That's SKIMS.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever. So visit skims.com to check that out and maximize your draw's comfortability.
Yeah, and just taking a look, Mustafa, at your question, just the GMs who have taken over bottom barrel franchises and turned them around. So just thinking of some of the examples, I'm thinking of like the Bengals before they were able to draft Joe Burrow. They had the same GM in place, Duke Tobin, and if he's even considered the GM, there's a weird power situation going on there with Mike Brown, the owner, but he is basically considered the GM and the talent evaluator and the head talent evaluator. Their processes remain pretty much exactly the same the entire time of his tenure, before Burrow, after Burrow. Before Burrow, they were toiling away. They had become the worst team in the NFL. After Burrow, I know this is a bad season for the Bengals because their defense is like 31st or 32nd, but after Burrow, with the exception of this season, every season, what'd you say?
Not when they play the Giants.
No, they play the Giants. Somehow they can shut down the Daniel Jones offense. But, with the exception of this season and the year he was injured, they've been a competitive team. The Texans were considered a bottom barrel roster before they traded Stroud. Now they're struggling a little this year. I think they're right around 500. Maybe he hasn't fully turned that roster around just yet. Casario, I think, is their GM from the Patriots. Washington, it's definitely started hot for them. I mean, they were at such a bad place last year, the Commanders. Their roster was really bad. They were not competitive in games against the Giants. When I watched that game, that DeVito game against Washington, there was a slew of just like open breakdowns in their secondary that should never happen. A team that clearly tuned out the message of their coach, of their previous coaching staff. They changed the GM, they changed the coach. It seemed to turn around fast. We need longer sample size there. I'd have to go back another time and kind of look into all of the different situations, the ones that worked out and didn't. You asked for just the ones that were turned around, so I just named a few right there.
All righty. We have Jim Spada 4066. Thank you so much. Says, appreciate the sponsor call outs during the show versus the commercials. Feels more organic and memorable. Well, thank you.
Speaking of sponsor call outs, Nick, why don't you call out our sponsors today?
I think today we just have Skims. Go get yourself a nice fresh pair of underwear. And you can go to Skims. And when you want to invest in your undergarments, you just go there. And when you buy something, go to podcasts online and you will see Big Blue Banter. So just click that and you can get yourself some fresh garments for your jewels and whatever else you got going on down below. Back to Jim Spada 4066. Do we know that Wilson was rejected outright for wanting to compete for quarterback one and not as if he demanded to start over Jones? In the same vein, is there any truth to the rumor that Jones would have waived the injury guarantee to continue playing? Looking forward to the quarterback class breakdowns. Keep up the good work. So I'll say this, Dan. I think a lot of it is conjecture. I don't think there was any official report. It was it was more so Russell Wilson went in. Everyone knew Russell Wilson wanted to be a New York Giant, and then he ended up going to Pittsburgh and staying in Pittsburgh. And a lot of people assumed it was because there was no guarantee for a shot. But I'm not 100% certain, but I think it's reasonable to just say, well, he didn't get a guaranteed shot in Pittsburgh either. He had to compete with Justin Fields, and then he ended up having the calf injury. Fields started, and now he is the starter. But it's still it's a little bit of a nebulous situation. And as for your latter point, I don't know either.
Yeah, I mean, they're both conjecture. I would say he probably had a better than just like given a chance to start situation in Pittsburgh, considering they named him the starter right away. And even when Fields was playing and Russ was hurt, they were basically like, we're going back to Russ when he's healthy, despite Fields winning a lot of games. So I think they probably did give him something close to a guarantee that we've looked at your track record. We're going to take aside maybe some bad play in Denver. We believe in you. We believe in what you can be for our franchise as the starter. This is something that I don't think, though, again, it is just conjecture. I don't think the Giants were at a point where they were ready to do that. Just given what I've heard from Joe Schoen on Hard Knocks, it seems like he was more focused on getting Jones a weapon and fixing the O-line and trying to make that contract work and trying to justify his decision as a general manager. That's just my speculation, though. As far as the second part of the question goes, I don't think there is any truth to that rumor. It's, again, one rumor reported by one reporter or mentioned by one reporter on passing in a podcast. I think another reporter denied that report. So you got the back and forth, someone saying it's true, someone saying it's not true regarding Jones, his agent waiving the injury clause. If I had to bet, Nick, if I was a betting man, I would say this is 100% not true. I don't think any agent in the world would agree to waive that injury guarantee so he can continue playing, because that agent would be fired and made an example of in future and probably lose his long-term career if Jones waived that injury guarantee in a lost season. He got injured and did not get that $25 million for his client. In my opinion, that would end that person's career. So I am very skeptical, and I would bet that is almost definitely did not happen.
I agree with you, but I would imagine it would have heavily came from Daniel Jones and have nothing to do with the agent. And Daniel Jones would have forced the agent to do it. So if Jones did get injured, then the agent would just be like, dude, you forced my hand here. This wasn't my decision to do so.
It would be tough for him to frame that, though, for the future, though, I think.
I understand that. All right. We have W. Cho C 23. I just wanted to make it rhyme. I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced. Appreciate the great work, fellas, especially during another pathetic lost season. I'm with you guys on being able to make a case to both keep and to fire Schoen. Just feel like the other general managers have similar hit rates on draft picks, trades, and free agent signings as Schoen. Makes me lean towards wanting to keep him. Curious of how you guys think Schoen stacks up against other general managers across the league. Obviously, winning means everything, but from the point of view of roster building and front office management.
Yeah, it's hard for Nick and I to do this one because we don't follow all these other teams closely enough that we need to know, right? We know some of the NFC East GMs, I wouldn't say inside out, but as inside out as we can for not covering the team. Nick, would you agree with that, Nick? So it's not really even that extensive there. But I will say, as far as Schoen goes, I think he's put a lot of emphasis on analytics and positional value. I think we've seen that play out in his decisions and what he said to us, both publicly to the media and then on Hard Knocks. I think he has made some tough decisions that have backfired on him from a depth standpoint on the offensive line last year, on the defensive line this year, wide receivers in the past. Some, which again is inherited from taking over a roster in cap hell from Dave Gettleman with no depth whatsoever from Dave Gettleman. But Joe Schoen has also missed on picks. That, I think, honestly, Nick, the draft stuff is the one where, like, I not hold him least accountable, but essentially am most willing to overlook, because I think the draft is a total crapshoot. I think a lot of GMs get it wrong and then can start hitting at any time. So that's the one that's like the least of concern to me, as stupid as that sounds, because it's like everything sort of if the roster's going to be good or not.
Yeah. Well, no, to circle back to what the person who asked the first question, it's Kayvon and Evan Neal were consensus top guys at their respective positions. I wouldn't say Kayvon was. Like, I had Aiden Hutchinson higher than Kayvon Thibodeau. A lot of people had Aiden Hutchinson higher than Kayvon Thibodeau. But regardless, those guys were very highly thought of and pursued prospects. And I wanted to ask you something, though, man. So how much do you think, and there's really no way for us to know this, but I think it's a fun exercise. How much do you think the optics of Xavier McKinney having the success he's having, Saquon Barkley, Leonard Williams, Julian Love, all of these Giants that Joe Schoen allowed to walk out the building, and now they're all Pro Bowlers and thriving. One of them's in the MVP conversation. Another one could be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. The optics of that are absolutely terrible. How much do you think that would factor into this with ownership? I tend to lean that it won't, but I don't think it's insignificant either, because it does not look great. Like, it's easy for somebody who covers the Jacksonville Jags or the Indianapolis Colts to be like, what the hell? That Joe Schoen guy is the worst general manager in the world. And I can see why people would make that assumption based on the fact that all these guys were New York Giants. They were all New York Giants, and the Giants still suck, mind you, but they were all New York Giants, and now they're thriving in other situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't say it's going to hold a huge factor with ownership. It might hold a bigger factor with fans. I've obviously seen it get piled on. I saw Pat Leonard wrote an article about it today. Just like, what's the point of that? I don't know. Also, Paul Schwartz's son wrote an article, but I think that's Paul Schwartz's son, Jared Schwartz. I've never seen him until recently. Wrote an article about this and how it's made things worse for the Giants. I think that's possible among the fans, that it's holding a lot of weight. I mean, you could look at it like this, Nick. If GM Joe Schoen had made a tough decision and just said, F it, we don't really believe in Daniel Jones, and moved on from him before the 2022 season and put in Tyrod Taylor as the starter before the 2022 season, I think you and I both agree that if Tyrod stayed healthy for that season, he would have taken the Giants to the playoffs too. I know it's a controversial thing among fans. I'm okay just saying it out loud because I know I believe it entirely, given what I saw with Tyrod on 2023 with nothing around him, and just given the vibe of that 2022 team. At that point, Nick, you would have been able to keep Julian Love. You would be able to extend Leonard Williams. You basically can keep everything because you're not paying for quarterback. And so where would they be at now if they had all these guys on their team, but no quarterback, or the quarterback was Tyrod, or, something like that? Yeah, probably a better place than what they are now, because that quarterback they paid $40 million to is not even on the roster right now. So, I think it does come a little bit back to that. And that's what we always say with quarterback, you and I. It's like, we're not as willing to just bend the knee and just take on a player that we don't really have faith can be a long-term top 5, top 10 guy. The reason being because everyone gets a second contract in the NFL at this position. All you have to do is a modicum of success, win one playoff game, have one good season out of 6, and you get a huge contract that goes against the cap. But the reality is, it's really hard to win once you start allocating 15 to 18% of your cap to one player, unless that one player is one of the main reasons you're winning over and over and over again. He has to be game in, game out. He has to be that reason you're winning when he's taking up that much cap.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you lose players like Love and Leonard Williams toward the end of his career, that type of stuff. So that's kind of where I see it.
I think you summed that up actually perfectly. Matthew S7335. Thank you so much. Asks, with all the teams looking for a head coach this year, will the Giants be an attractive spot, and who would be an upgrade? Can Bowen return? And if he can't, how can you replace your DC again under the same head coach? So a couple different things going on there. What you think, dude?
To the first part, I think it's only an attractive job if, well, sir, I still think, okay, let me start by saying this, Nick. I still think that despite their recent downfalls of franchise and kind of the mocking of Mara and everything, inside NFL circles, these coaches believe the Giants are actually a good destination based on John Mara. As crazy as that sounds, he's a loyal owner. He spends money like crazy. He's never afraid to spend money. And we have a good feel. Like, I see a lot of people talk about how, like, they go to the Giants, go to another franchise, and the facilities much better with the Giants. The food, like little things like that cost money from an owner to spend. When you have like the Bengals putting out like the least possible, right? Like Mike Brown has like old, like, projectors you'll see in like a 1990s schoolroom, like showing tape on. So it's like, I hate to drag Mike Brown, but he's the cheapest owner in the sport. So it's a fair thing to do. He still hasn't signed Higgins and Chase. They're both going to be, I guess, free agents somehow. So anyway, and they don't spend it for agents. But anyway, as far as that goes, I still think it's an attractive destination. But as far as like football goes, Nick, the football side of it, the only way it's attractive is if a young offensive mind has spent the time for whatever reason. I don't know why he would, because he's got a job to do with whatever team he's with this year. But if he spent the time to watch any of these quarterback prospects, or he just like knows them or has a personal connection to them, or he went to a game and liked what he saw on, not on tape, but just like how he throws the football live, and the Giants get like the first, second, or third pick, but probably the first or second pick, or even the first at that point, if it's only one guy this guy likes, that's the only way the job becomes attractive. Because as a coach, you're like, I want to coach that quarterback up. I want to develop him. I want to be the guy who brings this guy up. And that's something the Giants have, right? It's an ace up their sleeve to some extent. This is not viewed as a great quarterback class at the top, but maybe somebody loves one of these guys, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that's the only way.
I think there's also a defensive coach who could want to come here because the Giants have some defensive assets. If they think that they can coach up some of the young players who are struggling, Deontay Banks, if they like what they see from Dexter Lawrence, obviously Brian Burns. So I think from that standpoint, you could sell the Giants to a defensive coach, but do we want a defensive minded coach, especially when we're going to have a rookie quarterback? Yeah. That's not necessarily ideal unless you locate an offensive coordinator that you have trust and faith that he can develop said young player. Those guys don't grow on trees. We've seen so many situations. We've seen the situation play out already in 2024 with Shane Waldron and Caleb Williams. Even though when they hired Shane Waldron, the Chicago Bears, everybody was like, what are they doing? That is a terrible hire. Nothing was funnier than after Shane Waldron was fired from the Seattle Seahawks, someone interviewed, and I can't remember who, I'm sorry.
Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Yeah, someone interviewed Jackson Smith-Njigba, like, oh, what do you think of shit? And he was like, oh shit, man, someone's put me on the spot right here. It's like, he's a cool guy. Like, he didn't know what to say about shit. Like, I don't want that situation.
He paused. It was almost like watching, like, it
was awkward.
Once he paused, it was like you were going to expect it next here. Bum, 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 and then it was like he thought that music was going to play over with the zoom in, but
he was pretty bad.
pretty bad. All right. Jason Allen asks, I know there's a fear Joe Schoen could overreach for a quarterback in this draft, but if there is a new GM in place, it's hard to see that new GM not taking a swing on quarterback, given it's the biggest need and the fact that we are possibly picking number 1 or number 2, and we don't know when we'll be able to pick there again. Knowing this front office evaluation on the last crop of quarterbacks, I would feel more comfortable in them making the pick than a new GM. What are your thoughts?
Dan, you said this basically before. You said, hey, look, Joe Schoen did identify Jaden Daniels and Drake May. We learned the Jaden Daniels part during Hard Knocks. And I'll say this, though. I think identifying Jaden Daniels and Drake May is so much easier than identifying one of these quarterbacks, right? Because those two, it was pretty obvious they were going to be players, Caleb as well. With these guys, it's not, I haven't watched the film yet, but it doesn't seem like the consensus doesn't agree that it's obvious there's one clear guy who's going to step in and be that guy you cannot miss. And I'll say this, though, and this is how the draft is. There are plenty of analysts out there who make a living covering the NFL draft who would say stuff that we wouldn't necessarily agree with. Like, oh, Drake May, he's like my 8th quarterback because he can't throw the flat. And it's like, all right, but like watch him rip the dig route in between 3 defenders over the middle of the field. There are several NFL quarterbacks who cannot do that. I'll work with that baseline and then try to work on the minutia and try to fix that. So my point is it's more difficult, man, to I think scout this one just because it's not as clear, not as easy to see.
Yeah. And this one kind of, for me at least, and it goes back to a point I made earlier in the podcast, like, are we sure Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are the right guys to identify a quarterback and develop a quarterback? Are we sure Brian Daboll deserves the credit for Josh Allen and Joe Schoen deserves the credit for Josh Allen? If we are, I'm open to your idea, but all I know for sure is what I saw in Hard Knocks, and I got some weird montage of them talking let's tally up all the quarterbacks drafted in round 1 and let's look for a percentage-based hit rate. I don't want to be using percentages and statistics to decide if I'm going to take a quarterback or if I should or shouldn't. That is not good. Like, analytics can come into play in some degree. Like, I am okay with him deciding, like, look, with where we're at as a franchise, paying a 27-year-old running back, given the state of the NFL and the drop off at that position and everything that shows is not a good way, is not good business. But if you're telling me, like, based on the numbers and this amount of hit rate on the quarterbacks, no, finding a quarterback is all about you having conviction on that player and you believing that this guy is going to beat analytics. He's going to be an outlier. Every great quarterback that ever is drafted is basically an outlier in my mind.
That was a goofy part of Hard Knocks. I'm trying not to read too much into it because I think they were just trying too much because the cameras were on. But you're right. I mean, I could be wrong there, but it's like I can't imagine that there's a general manager there who's like, well, the hit rate on the quarterback. No, exactly. Everything that you like, this guy breathes football. His entire life is football, and I can't just say, well, I like this guy, but the hit rate. That would be the dumbest thing in the world.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Ross Vegas says, are the Giants showing any interest in Cam Ward? I'm only hearing them talk about Sanders. I think Ward is better.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing on that. So,
well, I'll say this, Nick. Don't worry about who they're showing interest in if you're a fan of this team, because last year the Giants went to like 4 Drake May games and they showed obvious interest in him. They didn't go to like any, we didn't see too much interest reports. I mean, they were at some games, but like reports on their massive interest in Jaden Daniels. But then when Hard Knocks came, we found the truth. Brandon Daboll's like, yes, I would trade up for Jaden Daniels. Not just draft him, I would trade up for him. That's a big sign that they liked him a lot. So I think they could be quietly really liking Cam Ward just as much as they're kind of outwardly and loudly showing their interest in Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, it's we'll wait and see. I don't have an opinion on this quite yet. Can't wait to get one though. We'll be watching tape here shortly.
Yeah, okay. Seth Bickle asks, what are your thoughts on getting Justin Fields in free agency next year? And how much draft capital would you give up in a trade for Trevor Lawrence, given that there was some way to acquire him? I know he signed a big contract with the Jags. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I would trade a decent amount for Trevor Lawrence still. I'd definitely be interested in bringing that guy in here for the New York Giants. As for what was the first part of the question? It was
Fields in free agency.
Justin Fields for a bridge type of situation. Sure, I would have him come in here and compete, but I don't have any. I don't necessarily have faith that he's going to take that next step as a passer that I think Dan and I are looking for. But he's still very young. He's an excellent athlete. He has flashed. He has elite traits. Whereas he has the ability to have an elite arm. I don't think it's necessarily consistent. But yeah, I'd be interested because I don't think it would cost a lot.
Yeah, so for me, I'll start with the Fields one. I actually personally kind of think he's the worst kind of bridge quarterback. I'll explain why. He's the type of bridge quarterback that could come in and win you games with, I guess, I don't want to call it leadership, but yeah, he's a good leader, but just running and making plays out of structure with his legs and sometimes with his arms. But I think that's the opposite of what I want in a bridge quarterback. I want someone who can keep or try to get this passing game on time and in rhythm so we can start to see actual development from the wide receiver position. And I haven't seen that at all from Justin Fields. Personally, I think he's I definitely think he's worse at keeping an offense on time and in rhythm than Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
So I think there could be lead to some nightmare tape and some nightmare regression from a lot of development of these receivers. So I am not willing to sacrifice winning some games that I don't care about in a season that doesn't have a ceiling just to which could in turn potentially hold back the development of the receivers, which to me is more important than the timing of the passing game. So no on that one for me. I know that sounds an interesting and surprising considering he's winning games. I just have no interest in that type of quarterback to bridge. On the Trevor Lawrence front, I'm close to you, Nick, and I think both of us will take some flack for that and get some heat for that because he's been a bad quarterback at the NFL level. I just also think that I don't see a lot of guys who are 6'6" with his kind of arm talent. And even in his bad year this year, and I watched the Jags, man, he's making intermediate throws that I don't even see most quarterbacks attempt.
He does crazy
balls in tight windows, and he's also hitting on the deep plane. I know he sucks the underneath stuff and staying on schedule right now and running that offense. But I also see traits that can be potentially coached out. Like you want to see, Sam Darnold. How did that happen? A lot of my friends ask me that. Like so many of my New York friends are like, I can't believe it. What happened with the Vikings and Sam Darnold? Don't you think that the same thing's going to happen for Daniel Jones? Well, part of why it happened for Darnold is because he had actual real talent to work with. A lot of good talent, arm talent. And I think Trevor Lawrence has more talent than Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
So those are the types of guys that I think can be reclaimed as reclamation projects.
So I think he asked though, what would I trade?
Oh yeah.
For him. Now you have to take on that contract. I would still, I think I would still trade a one, dude. Now
I would trade this one. Giants.
Now would I trade this one? That's the thing.
Yeah.
In a normal year, I think I would. Like if we had the 16th pick, the 20th pick, I would part ways, I think, with that to get somebody like Trevor Lawrence in our building.
I don't know. You get him and you get the contract, though.
I know.
Yeah.
But still, I'm looking for a quarterback with elite traits and who can actually mold themselves to be the franchise for the next 10 to 15 years. And I know he's getting paid a lot of money, but I would entertain that. Now, I don't know if I would with the first overall pick I would have to watch tape on these guys and get a feel for them. Because that rookie contract is so valuable and you're not going to get that with Trevor. Back to the Justin Fields thing real quick. I think he has utility if the Giants do bring in say if they draft Jalen Milroe or whoever, right? He has utility, or even if it's not Milroe and it's somebody who's not as mobile as like say if it's Shedeur or something.
Mm-hmm.
You can devise packages like the Pittsburgh Steelers have for a player like Justin Fields. I would still be open to bringing him in to compete and be that secondary, but I do like the the scenario you laid out where you get somebody who is like a Tyrod type, somebody who can keep the offense on schedule and act as a veteran leader, and not necessarily somebody who was kind of a bust and is floated around a little bit and who may not keep the offense as tightly ran as you would like. You want that veteran who has been around the NFL and who can really impart their wisdom onto the young rookie.
Yeah. And as far as your point on the Lawrence thing, I think my answer would be I'd be willing to give up the Giants early second. And I think if Lawrence was ultimately traded, the market wouldn't be as massive as you think because
the contract.
Know that contract. They basically have to take on paying him one of the highest paid contracts in the NFL at the position. So you're taking a big risk when you trade for him, and you're bypassing having that rookie contract. A player I'm looking for, I would love the Giants to have. It's so funny. And I'm sure it might not last and this take might look stupid, but and we liked him, by the way. We liked this guy's college tape. We didn't really think much of him. We watched a lot of it because we liked the player that he was playing with. And we were like, I guess he'll just be like one of those late round picks that's like a backup. Then he goes up and lights up one of the best defenses in the league for 340 and looked like he was throwing on time and on schedule. And it was Aiden O'Connell. That's kind of what I want for the Giants, an Aiden O'Connell type. He looked damn good against the Chiefs, better than any player should who's drafted in the 4th round at that position. And so that's the type of guy I would love the Giants to get as their QB2 moving forward at some point. And that's what I'd rather have for a bridge, because at least he's going to throw. He's going to keep the schedule. The passing offense on rhythm and on time. That needs to happen. These receivers are just getting killed on the Giants. So development is getting sapped by not having a passing game that's anywhere near on time and on schedule.
I don't know if their development's getting sapped, though, because I still think these are really now they could develop more, obviously, the more plays that you make. But I still think these guys, if you just insert them onto a team that has all of those aspects.
So perception is the better word, Nick, than development.
Yeah. Because I still think they're good. I still think they're getting open. They're creating separation. They can make the catches. It's not happening, which is very frustrating, and it hurts their wallet and their longevity in the league. If they don't have the stats, it really comes down to the nerdy people who dive into the film and be like, yeah, you got to bring this guy in. That's one of these guys, dude. Wan'Dale Robinson could be somebody who leaves the Giants in free agency and then gets a solid deal, and people are like, "Oh, that was dumb. Why the hell is he getting that deal?" And then he goes and he's like Christian Kirk was for Jacksonville when he was in Arizona.
I can totally see that happening as well. Hopefully not, though. All right, it sucks for us. Hakuna Matata, or
nice.
Hanukkah Matata.
Oh, okay.
It means core. It means no Corys. Loyal listener, but I've always gotten his name wrong on Twitter. If Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll were both fired, what members of the current front office and coaching staff would you deem worthy of the next regime keeping? Interesting. Feels like it can't be many, but then I see Giants fans calling for Brandon Brown to take over as GM, which to me feels insane.
Why would that be insane, though?
To him, it feels insane. I don't know.
Yeah. Brendan Brown, look, it's hard for Dan and I to really opine on this just because we're going off of basically the same information everybody else has. We don't exactly know, we know their roles on paper, but I don't know their day in, day out, what they're doing for their jobs. It seems like every time Brandon Brown is in front of a microphone, he seems insightful, seems like he knows what he's talking about, seems to be detail oriented and has a plan and goals. And I appreciate what he says, but I don't exactly know what his role is under Joe Schoen other than what his Giants website bio says.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, we've heard he played a role in scouting players like Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger before him, but it's hard to say what his role is.
I like the tight end.
Yeah, he does. It sounds like he does a pretty good job. As far as the front office goes, I'll probably take Nick's route, and I'll pass a bit because I don't have too much inside info there. Coaching-wise, I think Andre Patterson, somebody you would want to look to keep for sure. I personally like Mike Kafka a lot, and I think they should try to keep him. I think he's a good offensive mind. I think he was scapegoated last year unfairly.
Joel Thomas
did a really good job in year one. Yeah, there's another good example of a player of a coach. That's the running backs coach, correct?
Yep.
Saints guy. Yeah.
Yep.
Did a great job with the Saints. Has done a great job with Tyrone Tracy.
I'm not going to try to pronounce the linebackers, the quarterback or the linebacker coach's name, but he's somebody who has done a good job with Micah McFadden. I wish McFadden was a little bit better with tackling, but that's another name. And then Jerome Henderson's another name that gets thrown out there. I think we were very thrilled with Jerome Henderson early on. It does seem like right now there are some young guys who have regressed, and I think it's fair to question Jerome Henderson at this point, just like we praised him when everybody was hitting their best years with the New York Giants, with James Bradbury and Adoree Jackson and Jabril Peppers and Julian Love, all these kind of players. But yeah, Deonte Banks, Cordell Flott, you're not really getting the development that I think we wanted in those assets. But Drew Phillips but that's also more, I think, Drew Phillips being a stud.
Right. Okay. John, LO Cool John says, I could be mistaken, but on a previous pod, I thought you guys said something along the lines of how you don't like when people change their profile pic on Twitter. It's a kind of a way for people to find you. You and Nick recently changed yours, and now I ask myself, who is this sometimes?
So I completely understand. And that was me that said that. Dan has changed it several times. This is my first time changing it. And the only reason I changed it was because I lost my Twitter account for about a week, and I came back and I was like, you know what? It is time for a little bit of a change, a more recent photo, even though it's like the photo you give me shit about wasn't that long ago at this point. I didn't have facial hair at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't look anything like yourself in that photo.
I think I
do. No one does. Let's see if anyone does in the comments. If you think Nick's old Twitter photo where he's no beard, no mustache, and it's like from 2006, it looks anything like him now.
2006.
What was it? 2011?
No, that was 2018, 2017. No, so I guess it was a decent amount of time. Yeah, I was coaching at FDU at the time. That was my coaching photo. You can find that online. If you look up Nick Filato, Fairleigh Dickinson, you'll see that picture.
We'll see if that's the case. I'll be doing the back research on that. But as far as mine goes, yeah, I don't think I ever said that. Oh, cool, John. I hadn't changed mine almost ever. I think that old pic of me in that Blue Wire studio when Nick and I when I recorded a podcast out of Vegas when they just opened that studio, that was like 4 or 5 years old at this point. Maybe 4 years old at this point. So I just wanted to put up a fun pic of my brother and I from a recent golf trip. So I love golf and I wanted to put it up there. And it's a bright photo. Was that
from Florida?
That was.
Nice, man. Nice.
It was a bright photo.
How many holes did you play when you were in Florida?
We played 18 and 9 the first day, 27, 36 the second day. So what is that math-wise? 63 and then another 18. So 3 days we played. What is that? 81.
That's wow, man. I'd rather be dead than do that. That's crazy.
Well, I would rather be doing that every day of my life if it was possible. Maybe one day it will be. Andrew Owens asks, for the record, I am pro keeping Brian Daboll. Other than the fourth down decision-making and handling injuries, I think his play calling outweighs a lot. If he is gone, though, what are your thoughts on Bobby Slowick for head coach? His PFF background should help on fourth down, but it seems Houston people don't like him anymore.
Yeah, so I haven't familiarized myself with what's going on in Houston. It seems like a lot of people are saying, oh, CJ Stroud has regressed. There's this, there's that. So I don't know how Bobby Slowick has handled it. My impression of him heading into this season was very high. So I would entertain it. And then I would come back with an opinion after I dive into what exactly happened this year. But he took an offense. Everybody thought the Texans were going to just suck last year, Dan. They thought they were going to be dead last, and they ended up going to the playoffs. So with a rookie quarterback, that's kind of what the Giants want if we're going to draft a rookie quarterback. So Slowick, I would certainly be interested.
I don't hate it. He's not on the top of my list. I don't really love what I've seen from Houston this year. When I've had a chance to watch their games on film for Beyond the Box Score with CBS, I think O-line has been a big issue there. And I think CJ Stroud has regressed in the sense of his clock seems so much more sped up than it was last year. And that's led to some breakdowns in his mechanics and then off-target throws. I didn't really love Slowick's play calling last year. I just think CJ Stroud was unreal last year, Nick. To be honest, I felt like he was overrated. Guys that I like when I watch tape that I think are like difference makers from a play calling and design standpoint are Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen. So Liam Cohen is someone who I'd be more interested in hiring than Bobby Slowick personally. I think Liam Cohen has done a fantastic job working with a lot less personally, in my opinion. And my God, does he do a great job of designing not only the screen game, but the run game. And that is something that excites me with a player like Tyrone Tracy in the mix and with players like Wandale and Hyatt and Neighbors on the perimeter for potential screen game. So I just think he calls a great game, and I've loved what I've seen. And that was the case for him at Kentucky, too, with Will Levis. I thought he called a great offense for him.
Cautiously optimistic says, or asks, do Daboll and Schoen have to take a first-round quarterback? If the answer is yes, then I think you have to fire them because you can't force quarterback in a weak quarterback class.
It's great take. And this is a big dilemma the Giants are about to face. Yeah. It's twofold because if it's Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, the way for them to guarantee 2 more years is by taking a quarterback. If they don't take a quarterback and they suck again, it's going to be super easy to get rid of them, right? So that does maybe work into the decision, and maybe they're not putting the best interest of the franchise forward in their decision, which from an owner standpoint, Nick, probably should lead you in the direction of firing both and cleaning house, because the new GM, I know someone mentioned it earlier, but would a new GM definitely take quarterback? Maybe not. A new GM would have the freedom to kind of be like, nah, I'll wait till the next draft class if they don't like this, if they genuinely don't believe in this draft class. And, could even look to do what like Ryan Poles did, like trade the pick and pick up a haul for the next draft. I don't necessarily think that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll would be willing to do that, especially after things went down the way they did these past 2 years with limited options at quarterback a lot of the time due to injuries and bad management and really limited offenses that ensued because of it. So they're panicking, I would think. Now, this could change if this regime has the ability to trade for a veteran quarterback this offseason and then build it that way. But if they don't do that and they head into the draft season, Nick, with like DeVito and I don't know else at quarterback, they're probably going to feel that pressure to take one.
I tend to agree. I don't think they're going to.
That doesn't make me feel good, Nick.
No, it doesn't. I don't think they're, even know how talented Justin Hunter is. They're sitting there 1 overall. They're just going to go with Justin Hunter and forgo a quarterback unless they get somebody that they're comfortable enough in free agency. Now, who could that player be? Would it be a Sam Darnold? Would it be a player like that? It would take some stones, I think, for Joe Schoen to do that. I like the whole trade down situation, but who's trading up? And that's in a weaker quarterback class. Are the Giants going to realistically not draft a quarterback and then somebody else trade up, get that quarterback, and then that guy ends up being a good quarterback for that team? He
might not be a good quarterback.
No, he might not be. He might not be. You're rolling the dice, though, at that point.
You are. And I think the only way that could happen is, so first of all, I would prefer the Giants do that, trade the pick, then draft Travis Hunter there and just be like, oh, he's our all-world guy. I don't think he's going to save this team. One player like that, as good as he is. And I don't even know what they would do with Hunter. Like, they'd probably put him at corner and then have packages for him at receiver, which would be cool as shit, especially in the red zone and third downs. But just another mismatch, which actually sounds awesome. And I kind of love that idea. But the only way the trade could actually happen is if the Raiders fall behind and start winning games. Very annoying for the Giants for the Raiders to have blown that game against the Chiefs. Very, very, very annoying for the Giants and not good for us. We need the Raiders to fall behind because there's a lot of linked interest between the Raiders and Shedeur Sanders and that family. And that becomes the case where they're just locked in on Sanders. They have to get Sanders. That could be a spot for the Giants to just move 1 to 3 and pick up a haul.
Yeah, and I would absolutely support that.
Me too.
There's still holes on this roster that need to be plugged. How much more time do we have, Dan, here?
We've gone a while.
Here, let's read this one from Dills Houlihan. Okay. All right, Dills, what's up? Says, I feel like as a condition for allowing Daboll to keep his job, he should be forced to give up play calling to somebody next season. But when I think about the implications of that, ... he should just be fired then. He has clear shortcomings as a team leader.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. The implications are that he should have came to that on his own, I think is what you're saying. And I think that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. You looked yourself in the mirror and said, we're putting the burden on my shoulders. And then you had one of the worst offenses that we've seen. And that says a lot because the Giants have sucked so bad for a very long time, specifically on the offense.
When you frame it like that, Nick, it's hard for me to think we should keep him at all.
That's the point, though. That's kind of what we've been getting at over the last 3 or 4 weeks now. What's the argument to keep him?
Just that he could hopefully develop next quarterback.
Yes, exactly. And that's a hope, What is that,
Jammin88 asks, fun question. Assuming they would take the trade, would you trade the first overall pick and possibly more for Kyle Shanahan?
No, I don't think I would.
Yeah, this has been passed around, Nick, a lot on Twitter today. I'm a definite no. Like, I'm an egregious. This one to me is like not even close would I do this. I am personally of the camp of I would never trade a first round pick for a coach ever.
So I haven't seen this. Is there a rift between Kyle Shanahan, or is this just
there's like the idea that like maybe he's gonna lose his job.
Really?
So a few things why I would never do this for any let's say why I would never do this for Kyle Shanahan. I don't think he's an amazing coordinator and schemer. I don't know how great of a coach he is. I feel like his time management sucks, and I feel like he makes awful decisions that cost him games at times. But he's still an amazing coach. Everyone has their flaws. He's not someone who I think would fix the Giants. I think he'd help their run game. I think he could help the development of the quarterbacks the Giants have, whoever that may be. And that's great. But they're not going to get that quarterback if they trade the first pick to get this coach and then possibly more. So I'm just totally out on the idea of trading picks for coaches. personally. I am a big believer. I know others disagree with me, Nick. I believe more the players play, the coaches coach. And I think a lot of times good coaches are part of the good players and the good roster and the fact that there's a winning environment because they're winning games because the players are making plays. The coaches are not making the plays.
Yeah.
Just how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, I would never trade a first overall pick or even a first round pick for a coach. It's not my bag. He also asks if one of each, a guard, defensive lineman, safety, all with first round tape fall to the second round, which would you pick? As we always say, Dan and I don't usually draft by position, but for this exercise, I'd probably go with defensive line.
It's funny, Nick, because if all things considered the same, I would go with defensive line as well. And it's just changed a lot from my previous opinion on this position. I just think the value of finding these types of these D tackles, these interior defensive linemen who are awesome and basically just only in the second round because of the position they play is just so much for the franchise.
When we go over the all 22, we see it, right? The Giants don't have a second defensive lineman. Yep. When the Giants are in middle of the field close, which they're in cover 3 like 30% of the time, and cover 1 a bunch too, especially on third down, they're a little bit more fortified. But whenever they want to go too high, the other team just checks into a run and they pick up like 6-7 yards. They just run away from Dexter Lawrence. So there's no defensive tackle who can really hold firm to allow the linebackers to do what you need to do in Shane Bowen's defense. So defensive line that's a huge need right now on this roster. And that transcends the defensive coordinator.
Yep. All right, let's get a couple more in here, Nick. Robert Pupkin asks, what are your top Rupert Pumpkin asks, what are your 3 favorite Christmas movies? For my order goes Home Alone, Die Hard, and he says Argue with the Wall. I believe he's referencing the argument that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie to some. And then Christmas Vacation, number 3. What are yours?
Yeah, so Home Alone would be in there. Bad Santa, certainly in there. And then probably Just a Christmas Story. But there's probably some that I'm forgetting. I might Google it while you answer.
I am going, you took one of mine, Bad Santa. It's my favorite Christmas movie. Elf is my second favorite. And then Christmas Vacation.
So I got to give Elf another try because everybody sings its praises. And I'm just like,
You didn't like it.
No, well, I saw it when I was 15. I saw it when I was a kid. And I just haven't watched it again. Maybe I'll have a different perspective now that I'm a little older, but it just, I don't know. Everyone likes, it's the best Christmas movie. I'm like, it doesn't even hold a candle. It doesn't hold anything to Home Alone, let alone Bad Santa.
It's fair. It's fair.
I
get it. All right. Tommy J asks, is there a franchise in any of the 4 major sports that is less fun to be a fan of than the Giants?
I think there might be. I think the Jets.
Jets are easily less fun right now to be a fan of than the Giants.
It's just funny because they're both New York football teams. In just New York, other than the Jets, is there a team?
No,
I don't. No, probably not. Right, which sucks. But again, though, man, we at least have the history. We're proud, renowned franchise. We won 2 Super Bowls in our lifetime, so I do feel like there's a little bit of us being. A little bit high maintenance with that, but I think we deserve it at this point. We should not be happy with the product the New York Giants have put out there. We should hold the organization's feet to the fire for forcing us to watch this bullshit at this point. But at least I have seen it because, dude, I have Jet fan friends who just they don't even know what a Super Bowl is. They're just like, yo,
they don't even know what the playoffs are.
Seriously, bro. So that's crazy, man. That sucks. That
was 14 years, I think, since the Jets made the playoffs. An insane and possibly absurd number, especially now that almost 50% of the teams from each conference make the playoffs.
Dude, it's nuts, dude. They went to the AFC Championship game, in Mark Sanchez's first and second year, and haven't made the playoffs since. That was Mark Sanchez. That was how many quarterbacks ago, bro? That was so many quarterbacks ago. You got Aaron Rodgers, you got Zach Wilson, you had somebody in between.
Darnold,
Chino, Darnold, all these quarterbacks. Not one even sniffed the playoffs, dude. How crazy is that? Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Damn, he was the one who came closest of all of them.
I know, man. And he was probably the most fun of all of them. Brett Favre. Well, Brett Favre was before that, though.
Was it before that? Before Sanchez, yeah. All right, last question. Sorry for everyone who we didn't get to. There's probably another 10 or 12. Maybe on the next show, or maybe we'll do it on a follow-up to a different show, Answer the Rest. But Kelly Fisher has been a longtime fan of ours, so I wanted to make sure she got her question answered today. Says, if Daboll+Schoen are not fired, do you see any significant changes the Giants could make to the team that would bring you optimism?
I think any change tends to engender optimism. I just don't know if that optimism is founded in anything. It's just change from a status quo that was rough, right? And it's pretty rough. We're in some rough waters at the moment. So I think any change would engender some optimism. But actual true optimism, yeah, I think there are moves that could probably be made, or at least I could talk myself into, but we'll have to wait and see. I don't even know who's going to be available. I don't know what Mara or Tish's plan would be if they do move on from these two. I think they're going to move on from the coach. I don't think they're going to move on from the general manager, but I still think the coach possibly could save his job in the next 5 games. But I don't know how much confidence that gives me at all. What about you, Dan?
I think for me, you know what that one move would be, Kelly. Drafting a quarterback. Even if I'm not fully sold on that quarterback and I'm leaning likely, I mean, we'll watch the tape, but I don't know if I'm going to be fully sold on any of these quarterback prospects. I'll definitely have some optimism with some of these guys. I can already see an optimistic case I can build in my head for Shedeur Sanders. I can already see an optimistic case I can build in my head for Cam Ward, if the Giants are able to take either of those two, for example. So I think that is what will bring me the optimism, because I'm not foolish. I've seen franchises turn around and everything looks horrible for Washington before last year. I mean horrible, truly horrible they were last year. Not competing in games, defensive breakdowns, all the things you're seeing, locker room with the Giants now were happening last year with Washington. Then it changed. Cincinnati. Then it changed. And all these other examples throughout the history of this sport. So that would be the one for me, Nick.
And the Washington model may just be the model for the New York Giants. And I'm not talking about drafting the quarterback. That's the obvious move. But the bringing in of a veteran Bobby Wagner, bringing in a veteran Austin Eckler, and making those leadership moves for your locker room, and kind of surround Jaden Daniels with an environment that is going to allow him to succeed, to take a burden of leadership off of his back, which he doesn't seem like he even needed that. But those additions, maybe we should put a little bit more weight into those additions as well, because Adam Peters knocked out this offseason. I mean, the proof is in the pudding at this point.
Yeah, and defensively, Dan Quinn is doing a great job. I got to give him credit. I've spoken in the past of it maybe being a retread higher, but watching that defense get better and better as the year goes on without that much talent, it's been impressive to see. So great job there. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Went a little over the allotted time we wanted, an hour, but we got a lot of fun questions in. Thank you for joining us. Stick with us through this rough season. More content coming. Nick and I have already discussed off pod. We're probably going to be diving into draft stuff much earlier than we have in the past. Just for the sake of look, there's 5 more games somehow in this season, and there's just no interest at all from the fan base in these games, which is totally understandable. Myself, I have no interest personally in these games, if I'm going to be honest, just none. I mean, I'm hoping for some development from some young players, but it's really bleak right now with what we're seeing product wise on the field. As bleak as I can ever remember it. So might be time to turn to the draft. And so keeping it locked and loaded for that. Have a great rest of your week, and make sure you hit that like button right now. Please click that like button, or Tom Coughlin's going to come get you. If you know, you know. All right. Have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you soon.